This is really has taken on a life of its own with the belief this is a next generation phenomenon. And you've been talking to people out there in Times Square who at least are aware of the name, right?
Right. People we've talked to do use Snapchat, and Snapchat claims of 158 million daily users. The problem for Snapchat, I've been playing with the spectacles, and we've been showing them to people, not so spectacular. And that seems to be the response. When we ask people, what do you think? They say, it looks cool. And then you ask, would you spend $129 to use them? They say, no. So that's going to be a problem that Snapchat, I mean, these guys are clearly smart enough to figure out how to get past that, but they've got to get past that.
Shama, of course, that might be a moot point today, and maybe a longer-term concern. Day one of an IPO oftentimes doesn't mirror what it does later on. We learned with Facebook it had a stumbling debut in the weeks that followed, and it righted itself, and the stock ended up doing quite well today. Too early to tell here, and I know all the variables and differences. What do you think? Where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I think Snapchat's biggest challenge is going to be how to expand their user base, right? Because let's face it, the majority of people using Snapchat are 25 and under. I mean, they match their founder demographic, which is great, but they've really maxed that out. So user growth is slowing. The other thing which Snapchat has to really think about is their costs are extremely high. So they're more in the red than Facebook or Twitter was when they IPO'd. So, Snapchat's on sort of shaky ground, and so it'll be a really interesting one to kind of sit back and watch for a bit.
Frankie, when I look at this, I also think how a company is trying to not be a debacle or prevent what happened to Facebook or certainly Twitter by at least in the first year locking up the float or a quarter of the float, the shares outstanding, so that those people cannot sell for a year. You think that will mitigate any of the kind of get rich and dump kind of thing that we see with a lot of these offerings?
I think Snapchat's going to be a pretty strong company. They're never going to be as big as a Facebook, but I definitely think they're going to surpass Twitter in market share.
Well, that's a low bar lately with what Twitter. By the way, Frankie, on that, why hasn't Twitter, given the fact that it's the communication tool of choice for the President of the United States and so many others, why hasn't it been able to leverage off that or do better?
I think it's a leadership thing. They've switched CEO many times since they founded. Yeah. Facebook has always had strong standing, as Snapchat as well.
Adam, you touched on this when you were talking to people, but I noticed this as well, that my teenage sons don't know what Facebook even is. And dare I say, if I came home now, they might be past Snapchat for all I know. So I know it's a younger and younger audience, but when my teenage sons want to spend something, they come to me. You know what I mean? So right. If there's a big audience of young people like my sons, short of compliant parents, where is this money going to come from?
Well, that's the question. They lost, $500 million last year, so they haven't figured out how to turn this into a profitable business. But Evan Spiegel and his partner are certainly, they're geniuses. They can probably make this work. How they're going to do that, we haven't figured out yet, but they say that this is now a camera company. So how do you get your teenage sons, Neil, to follow them into their 20s and then turn this into an application that they can use to do more than just showing themselves throwing up or vomiting a rainbow, which is what teenagers do with this thing right now.
You're right.
But what do you do when you're 23 or 24?
Yeah, I don't get that. All right, Shama, that's a very good point right there, and how you keep this going with you. But when they said, to Adam's point, we're a camera company, and I'm looking at the history of camera companies, I don't know what they were trying to say there. Eastman Kodak comes to mind, Polaroid comes to mind. Maybe they were taking Nikon but man, oh man, that is a graveyard filled with promising technology that didn't go anywhere, and it was kind of like a Johnny One Note. So if that's what they're saying they are, I don't know. What about you?
What they're not saying is what they're really wanting to do is be Apple, right? That's kind of the goal. I think if you really looked at sort of how they've talked about the company and how they positioned it, it's great. We've got this crazy user base. We've got this strong brand. But they really are looking, I would imagine, at Apple as a model than Polaroid or Kodak or any of those companies, because it's almost like, what's the end goal?
Apple isn't a camera company. Apple isn't a camera company or a phone company. It's sort of like a diversified technology fund right now, if you think about it.
And that's exactly exactly what I think Snapchat wants to be. Snap wants to be, but that's not what they're saying, right? Because
then why
the
are they saying this? Because I think that's the door. Help me with this, Frankie. Yeah. I think that's a death knell for them to say we're a camera company, especially if you're saying you're a camera company and it's your eyeglasses, spectacles, whatever they call these goofy things, that is going to be what you're hanging your future on. Now, I've seen some of the models that wear these things. They're stunning. They're beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But I'm telling you, I'm not going to make a multi-billion-dollar enterprise out of that, am I?
Well, I think they're just going to have to adapt or die. You know, they're just going to have to diversify, and they're just going to have to experiment. And obviously, they're running advertisement and doing content media on their Snapchat app. So they're just throwing a huge blanket to cover everything, I think.
But, you know, one of the things that, and I like what you were saying, Shama, you could diversify and leverage off of that. And, Adam, one of the things I know with Facebook, they're going to be more live streaming events, et cetera. I've seen a variety of hosting to do the same. Is that going to be the moneymaker down the road for them, that they're ubiquitous, that they do kind of say what Shama was saying, Adam, kind of everything?
If they can beat
absolutely.
Facebook to it, then yes.
Go ahead, Adam.
I'm sorry, Neil. So here's the deal. These glasses only record 10 seconds. When Snapchat, if they can beat Facebook to the device that is small and is right here and records all the time and shows your life in real time to your friends, and you can stream live, they beat Facebook. Whoever does that first makes a lot of money.
Yeah, I guess it will.
I don't think they're going to beat Facebook. I think Facebook's in its own category. I think Facebook has done what Snapchat is going to try to do, which is expand its user base. To be able to grow like they want, they're going to have to get beyond the 25 and younger audience, which is why, I mean, when they say camera company, that means something very different to millennials, to this generation, as it does. This is not your grandpa's camera company, right? A camera, picture, content. These have totally different definitions now, and that's the innovative way that they're really looking to go.
I know you're young, but you were inadvertently, I'm sure, referring to me as a grandpa. And